From the heart of Missouri, Linda Bloodworth-Thomason expertly crafted narratives that delve into the intricacies of Southern life, often infusing humor and grit into her storytelling. Her creations, such as the iconic series Designing Women, highlight the strength and wit of Southern women facing societal challenges. I can't help but appreciate her gift for balancing laughter and profound realities. Her characters remind me that amidst life's chaos, we can lift each other up. How I aspire to weave that kind of camaraderie into my own stories.
The Elusive Pralines, a pear salad, and the chivalry of Leslie's husband. The almost thunderous sound of Leslie slapping the table snapped in two the thoughts invading my mind and jolting me back to reality with a visceral shock, akin to snapping out of a trance on a monotonous highway. The stark recognition hit me like a cold splash of water, my right foot instinctively pressing down against the worn linoleum under the table, desperately seeking an imaginary brake pedal that wasn't there. The impulse felt absurd, comical even, yet it echoed a primal need for safety, an instinct as ingrained as breath. But that ridiculous act of seeking control crumbled under the scrutiny of Leslie's glare as she slapped the table, the sound a sharp punctuation to the silence. Her face, a vivid tableau of determination, brought a flicker of regret for the fleeting thought that perhaps colliding with that truck might have been better than whatever tempest brewed behind her eyes. I recognized that fierce look, one that promised questions I was not prepared to answer, a storm ready to sweep away my pleasant daydreams of bourbon. "Savannah, Memphis, Beaumont, where the hell are you? Get out of that head of yours," she demanded, her voice cutting through my haze with the authority of a siren. I drained the last of my coffee, the rich swirl of Irish cream and bourbon warming my veins, before I feigned a wistful smile and replied, "Lost in liquor, I reckon." I realized, with a certain giddy clarity, that I could drunkenly stumble and trip down the yellow brick road of memory all day long, guided by a joyful recklessness, and without the slightest bit of effort at all. The world of recollections lay open before me, sparkling and beckoning. But as the ghost of sobriety loomed in the edges of my awareness, I knew in my heart that whatever Leslie had brewing would require far sharper senses than the comforting haze of bourbon and Irish cream could provide. I needed to anchor myself. It was all but inevitable. Raising my left hand, I extended my forefinger towards Leslie, silencing her before she could unleash whatever wild scheme was brewing in that sharp mind of hers. My right hand glided over to rest on my dear Aunt Barbara Lee's shoulder, a subtle gesture meant to offer comfort and solidarity as she navigated the tides of grief gripping her heart. "Be a dear, and start another pot of coffee, please. I expect that we may need our wits about us today," I said, my voice resounding with a soft authority that demanded her attention. Leslie nodded, her playful energy shifting to a more somber purpose. She picked up the bourbon and Irish cream bottles with a swift motion, the glass clinking against each other, and slid them away into the cabinet, each movement carrying an air of resolve. The act felt like a cleansing, an expulsion of the spirits that had coated our moments together, and perhaps clouded our judgment. With her back turned, she moved toward the coffee maker, deftly avoiding the echoes of our earlier revelries. As she deposited the empty coffee pot in the sink, the sound of water splashing filled the room, a refreshing contrast to the lingering weight of the alcohol-soaked air. I seized the moment to add another layer to my request, my voice carrying at once compassion and purpose. "And call that dear husband of yours, and have him take Aunt Barbara Lee home." I directed toward her with a weighted glance, needing to ensure that my aunt wouldn't linger in the midst of any brewing turmoil. Turning towards Aunt Barbara Lee, who was still dabbing at her eyes with a paper napkin, I continued, "We'll come pick you up and take you to Edna Rose's viewing." My heart ached for her, that gentle, familiar figure brimming with wisdom and warmth, yet I felt a flicker of hope in shared anticipation of honoring our dear friend. Aunt Barbara Lee nodded in silent agreement, a soft smile breaking through her tear-streaked disposition, and in that moment, I believed that despite the heaviness surrounding us, we could find strength and solace together, navigating through the shadows cast by loss. After a final steaming cup of coffee had been consumed, Leslie's husband swept into the kitchen, ever the stoic, chivalrous knight, his presence shifting the atmosphere with swift authority. He gathered Aunt Barbara Lee under his arm, guiding her toward the back door, but not before pausing for an impactful moment to cast a stern glance at both me and Leslie. His head shook ever so slightly, a motion that spoke volumes, an admonishment we could not ignore for being supposedly refined grown women, tipsy before lunchtime, and undeniably up to some mischief that surely reeked of trouble. As they moved through the threshold, the hair on my arms stood on end, not from the chill creeping in with the morning breeze, but from an uneasy certainty that I saw the spirit of Leslie's mother, Mama Udine, lingering behind him. She stood there like a guardian, peering down with the same pursed lips and disapproving frown, the very essence of maternal watchfulness incarnate. A soft but unmistakable tisk of her tongue echoed in the back of my mind, as if she were chastising us from beyond, with a mix of concern and a bit of pride at her contribution in the forming of our formidable determination. Once the door clicked shut, leaving an echo in the kitchen that felt too deafening, I pushed my empty coffee cup aside, reclaiming my space in the midst of the silence that had settled heavily around us. The warmth of caffeine coursed through my veins, reminding me of the chaos about to unfold. This day is not going to end without someone making a scene, is it? I broke the quiet, my voice a gentle but probing nudge into the weighty air. She looked up from her coffee, the remnants of a smile flickering over her face like an old, cherished film reel, then nodded knowingly. "That's your job, ain't it?" The words spilled from her lips, woven with equal parts affection and exasperation, a truth we both recognized. "Like last Christmas?" I asked, grinning sheepishly while I dragged another moment alive like an old Technicolor movie. As we pulled into the Piggly Wiggly parking lot just a few days before Christmas, the chilly air nipped at our faces, contrasting sharply with the warmth spilling from the car's interior. I gripped the steering wheel of my beloved vehicle, that peculiar 1939 Studebaker President hearse, glimmering like a vision from a fever dream, its Baker Miller pink paint reflecting the waning sunlight in an oddly cheerful manner. I could feel Leslie hunched down in the passenger seat beside me, her coat collar pulled up around her cheeks, and sporting a pair of the darkest sunglasses you'd ever laid eyes on. Absurdly oversized round lenses that even Audrey Hepburn or Jackie O would struggle to pull off. She looked more like a sunbathing raccoon than a sophisticated Southern lady. Through the muted aura of her sunglasses, Leslie muttered rather loudly, "We should have taken my caddy." I couldn't help the smirk that crept onto my face, already aware of the answer buried beneath her words. "And why exactly is that, dear? I prodded, amused by her predictable lament. Leslie pushed her sunglasses down to the tip of her nose, peering over them with an expression laden with theatrical exasperation. "Mortifying. Just mortifying. I will die from embarrassment riding in this monstrosity of yours. It is just tacky like those ill-mannered Yankee women on that Housewives of God knows where," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain as she gestured vaguely at the pink vehicle surrounding us. My heart fluttered a little at her criticism, a familiar pang of defensiveness rising within me. This hearse, draped in cotton candy pink and adorned with gleaming chrome that dazzled in the sunlight, was a mix of beauty and the macabre that felt like home. The wide, polished rims caught glimpses of my anxious expression, an intricate play of reflections that seemed to embody every tense emotion I wrestled with. I knew that the interior, with its black leather and playful nods to life, including that bobblehead of Scarlett O'Hara, who offered a mocking bob under the weight of our situation, was far from tacky. It was a surreal testament to the intertwining of life and death, laughter stifled beneath sorrow, carrying the ghosts of those who once roamed southern streets. As Leslie rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically, I couldn't help but smile, reveling in every unrefined, absurd moment the day promised. The engine's low purr faded as I shifted the car into park, feeling the slight jolt signal the end of our jaunt through the twisting back roads of the county. With a flick of my wrist, I reached over and tapped my glittered, red-polished fingernail against the dented bumper sticker affixed to the passenger side sun visor, the familiar phrase catching the light, "At least you're not riding in the back of this car." A chuckle escaped my lips as I quipped, "If that happens, ma'am, we have plenty of room in the back for you." The irony of it hung in the air for a fleeting second before I turned my attention back to gathering my keys and purse. I could still hear Leslie's cranky muttering from the passenger seat. "I just do not understand why she has to have cars that announce that her insanity in all her glory has arrived. Most everybody in this county already knows she is nuts. If they don't know it, they'll only need 5 minutes to find that she belongs in a padded room somewhere." Her voice had a way of mixing annoyance with exasperation, a familiar tune from our endless road trips, but one I could hum along to without missing a beat. Sticking my head back into the vibrant pink car, the scent of air freshener mingled with Leslie's grumbling complaints. "Well, I love you too," I threw in, feigning warmth against her frosty demeanor. Adding mock sternness, I leaned closer, matching her tone. "Now get out of the car and come on." With that, I slammed the door shut. We stepped into the Piggly Wiggly, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me like a swarm of lazy wasps, each flickering bulb casting a garish glow across the aisles. Leslie and I made our way to the shopping buggies, and as I grabbed one, I could hear her murmuring to herself about always picking the one with the wonky wheel. Indeed, the wheels were a rite of passage in this store, each buggy a testament to the quirks of Southern life, a fitting metaphor for the neighborhood's peculiar rhythm. The store was unusually busy today, the holiday rush alive with the clatter of carts and the chatter of shoppers, crowded aisles forcing us to maneuver like a couple of minnow trying to find our way upstream. I let my hands hover over the banana bunches, casually inspecting them, although I had no intentions of buying any. Their yellow skins glistened under the harsh lights, like forgotten promises. Meanwhile, Leslie was already down the aisle, using not an ounce of tenderness, selecting a head of iceberg lettuce, her determined movements echoing a world weariness I recognized too well. With a shrug, I abandoned the bananas and grabbed a net bag of tangerines without a second glance, offering a nonchalant tradition to justify the impulse purchase before rushing to catch up with her. As I caught up, Leslie was busy selecting several cans of Pear halves, swimming in 100% juice. Without shifting her gaze, she called over her shoulder, "Don't let me forget a big jar of the Duke's mayonnaise." In an attempt to be helpful, I replied back, "If you need mayonnaise, I still have half a dozen gallons of Hellmann's from Daddy's young widow's recent shopping adventure at Sam's Club. Even if I put it on everything, I will never—" My voice trailed off under the weight of Leslie's stern look, compelling me to continue, "Duke's it is." The usual grin on my face faltered slightly as I asked, "Are you making your mama's pear salad?" Leslie dropped the last can into her buggy and replied, "I'm taking a large batch to the LGBT Resource Center by the Chinese buffet. You know those two boys that run the place always contribute to community gatherings, even the ones they ain't welcome at. Why, little Miss Edna Rose was just telling me that they even made and delivered 2 big pans of tuna casserole to those awful people down at Calvary's Church of the Pentecost and foot washing. They even used fresh tuna. A tray of pear halves on a lettuce leaf with a glob of Dukes and a sprinkling of Kraft shredded cheese that was desperately needing the splash of color from maraschino cherries or the pleasant addition of chopped walnuts didn't seem a worthy response to their fresh tuna, though I reminded myself that good manners certainly wasn't a contest. Those 2 boys had good raising and are from good old Charleston families, I remarked. They make an adorable couple, like something out of a pharmaceutical ad, and a good shake-up for this stuffy community. I turned to grab a wooden rolling pin from the shelf, tossing it into Leslie's buggy, while she shot me a confused look. The grin on my face morphed into a chuckle as I said, "In case you need to defend those boys." Leslie, slightly indignant at the implication of unladylike behavior, placed her hands on her hips, ready to retort, but she stopped, her head tilting slightly upward. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her tone shifting into one of bemusement. Through the crackle of the store's old loudspeakers came the incessant refrain, "I want a hippopotamus for," repeating in a skipping loop, a bizarre anthem of the absurd amidst our festive frenzy, reminding me that holiday madness wasn't reserved just for shopping, but flourished in every tiny detail of everyday life. The crowd inside the Piggly Wiggly had increased dramatically, turning what had once felt like a leisurely holiday shopping trip into an exercise in patience and stifled annoyance. The aisles bustled with people eager to grab the last remnants of their Christmas lists, transforming the simple act of maneuvering our buggies into a game of strategy. It took Leslie and me several long minutes to turn our buggies onto the next aisle, the ebb and flow of bodies jostling against us, like waves crashing against a ship's hull. A cacophony of voices rose in the air, blending into a dissonant chorus of laughter, arguments, and hurried greetings, each note washing over us as we navigated toward our goal. Leslie's keen eyesight darted towards the shimmering shelves of condiments, her face lighting up with a determined gleam. With all the urgency of a racehorse released from the gate, she made a beeline towards the largest jar of Duke's mayonnaise that sat proudly among its more modest companions. I chuckled quietly to myself as I watched her hustle. There was no other mayonnaise, mustard, or ketchup that mattered. This was Leslie's holy grail, the secret ingredient that would elevate her pear salad into something divine. As her figure retreated in the distance, I paused, at the shelves full of candy, my desire intensifying with each colorfully wrapped package. I found myself studying the rows intently, searching for the elusive box of pralines that Aunt Barbara Lee adored more than the Grinch could ever love Christmas. Picking through the options, I felt a flicker of hope dimming in my chest as my eyes landed on a bare spot next to the boxes of chocolate-covered cherries. It did not bode well for my search, this glaring emptiness signifying the rapid advance of holiday shoppers who had swooped down, taking all the treasures I sought. I sighed softly, shifting my gaze further down the aisle when I noticed a stock boy at the far end, his face a portrait of determination as he struggled with a case of mini marshmallows. The boy's efforts displayed a kind of rugged persistence, battling against an already full shelf that seemed intent on repelling every single marshmallow he tried to cram into it. Steeling my resolve, I aimed my cart and started down the aisle, murmuring a half-hearted apology to those I brushed past. Just as I approached the stock boy, I paused briefly next to Leslie, who was still staring at her shopping list, lost in thought, despite the fact that the pear salad only had 4 simple ingredients. "I just have to get a big box of pralines for Aunt Barbara Lee," I said, not bothering to couch my urgency in idle pleasantries. Aunt Barbara Lee Beaumont had a terrible fondness for those sweet pecan treats, and I couldn't help but think she might be obsessively consuming them to fast forward her way through the final chapters of her life. Watching her indulge in those sugary morsels, I sometimes fancied the notion that they were a temporary escape from the growing woes of aging, a guilty pleasure that masked the passage of time with syrupy sweetness. When I finally reached the stock boy at the end of the aisle, I leaned against my cart, summoning my best southern charm. "Excuse me, honey, can I drag you away from those marshmallows to show me where y'all are hiding those big boxes of pralines that you had last week? My dear aunt has already eaten the 4 boxes I bought." His reaction was that of pure surprise, as he jumped to attention like a toy soldier nutcracker, a smile bursting forth as he realized who was speaking to him. "Why, hey, Mrs. Beaumont," he said, a hint of familiarity tracing his tone. It was then that I recognized Lucas LaSalle, my son's best friend, and warm recognition pooled in my chest like a comforting balm. As my eyes traveled over him, I took pleasure in noticing the way he filled out the faded blue jeans he wore, the broadness of his chest, emanating a vitality that momentarily transported me away from the madness of the grocery store. A brief thought flitted across my mind. Lucas could be a fun way to spend a naughty weekend, but I quickly dismissed it. There would be repercussions, and I wasn't quite ready to deal with another person's overly dramatic response to my behavior. Before I could lose myself further in those tantalizing musings, Lucas interrupted my thoughts with genuine curiosity. "How is JD doing, ma'am?" I slowly shook my head, feeling the heaviness of my truth. "Well, sweetie, he is still upstate in that asylum. My hellacious twin girls and I are going up to see him the day after Christmas. I'm afraid that we've hit a snag in his treatment. He is absolutely convinced his doctor is really General Sherman and is trying to get Confederate secrets out of him. You know his daddy drank when I was pregnant." I heard the stifled giggle of Leslie behind me, her usual response to my frequent attempts to blame all the woes of the world on the SOB, who stubbornly refuses my perfectly reasonable request to just drop dead. The words spilled over, sealed in the warmth of familiarity. But as they left my lips, I couldn't resist the temptation any longer and placed my hand on one of Lucas's biceps, feeling the heat radiate beneath my fingertips. For a moment, I debated whether putting up with my son's inevitable hissy fit and enduring a lecture on decorum from Leslie would be worth a little carnal twist, the thrill sending shivers down my spine. In an effort to recenter myself, I turned back to him and asked, "Are you on winter break from Citadel, sweetie?" My tone summoned everything back into the realm of safety, diverting from the complexities of desire intertwined with responsibility, at least for now. The atmosphere inside the Piggly Wiggly was a swirling maelstrom of holiday excitement and frantic shoppers, and I found myself leaning slightly closer to Lucas, the stock boy, as we continued our playful chatter amid the traffic jam of grocery-filled buggies. The aisles became akin to a surreal maze, each cart an obstacle course as families weaved in and out, struggling to maintain their cheerful demeanor while hustling to snag last-minute ingredients for the festivities. Lucas radiated charisma, his smile contagious as he responded to my flirtations with a mock seriousness. "Mrs. Beaumont, you know this isn't how one goes about their grocery shopping," he joked, gesturing to the growing line of impatient shoppers behind us. I was caught up in the moment, shamelessly enjoying the banter, hanging on the thrill of our exchange amidst the chaos. Yet, I could feel the prickle of urgency creeping in, the realization that the world around us was escalating into an awkward gridlock. Quickly, I decided to shift the conversation. "Now, about those pralines?" I dove right into the heart of our initial mission, hoping to salvage our grocery run from the clutches of distraction. Lucas's expression transformed from playful to apologetic as he replied, "Well, I actually stocked the last case of them earlier today, but then an elderly lady in a velour jogging suit and a big straw hat came through just after and bought up all of them. I couldn't help but chuckle, picturing the scene vividly. A determined old bird, stylishly overdressed for Piggly Wiggly, zooming in on her sugary treasure. I wonder if that could have been Aunt Barbara Lee. It sure sounds like her, I mused aloud, an affectionate grin spreading across my face as I imagined my aunt, her penchant for sweets as notorious as her formidable personality. The image of her trundling down the aisle, eyes gleaming at the sight of pralines, filled me with warmth. With a flash of gratitude in his eyes, Lucas nodded, and I shifted my focus to the disgruntled line of customers forming behind me, folks taping their feet and muttering under their breaths. I mouthed an apologetic sorry to them, silently promising myself I'd hurry it along. The chaos of the holiday rush swirled around us, reminding me of the delicate balance between festive spirit and the need for efficiency. Leslie and I resumed our trek across the store toward the dairy cases, attempting to dodge careless carts and enthusiastic children high on sugar. The bakery section attempted to lure us with the enticing aroma of freshly baked bread, but we pressed on, determination fueling our steps. We continued our journey, skirting through the bakery and deli section, where the allure of pastries beckoned, but failed to capture my attention. Without missing a beat, I scooped up 2 large containers of ambrosia fruit salad, grinning as I added them to my buggy. "I'll put this in a big Tupperware bowl, and you can take it with your pear salad. And don't you dare tell them it is store-bought. I don't want to be talked about until after the new year by the alphabet people," I stated, the words tumbling out with a playful air. However, the stubborn streak in me flared up. I met her scrutinizing gaze with a playful defiance, not wanting to back down just yet. "What? Do you want me to whisper homosexual like an old widow of a Southern Baptist preacher talking about her beautician?" I shot back, the absurdity of my words lingering in the air. Leslie let out a sigh of resignation, shaking her head slightly as her humor softened the moment. "That's hairstylist," she said bluntly, trying to instill a bit of decorum in me one last time before staking her claim on a position in the long checkout line. As I nudged Leslie gently with my elbow, I silently pointed out the woman ahead of us in line, a striking figure of her own making. Every inch of her screamed for attention as she stood there, blissfully oblivious to the subtle waves of shock rippling through the customers nearby. Her hair was a riotous explosion of vibrant orange-red, akin to the flames of a bonfire in desperate need of a good conditioner, frizzing out in all directions like an untamed squirrel. Leslie's expression morphed into one of appalled astonishment, but the dismay quickly faded as she regained her composure, whispering, "We all have the protected right to dress as tasteless and tacky as we'd like. It's called our freedom of expression." Her tone reflected an air of superiority, a half-hearted defense of individuality that we both knew was a rickety foundation. I couldn't resist a snide retort. "That doesn't mean we can't judge them." The words slipped past my lips, the familiarity of our charade igniting a spark of mischief. Leslie, ever the playful foil, shot back, "But we do not sentence them." At that, we both broke out in giggles, infectious and reckless, our laughter weaving through the air like ribbons of mischief amidst the mundane. The woman ahead of us turned abruptly, glaring like a beleaguered hawk spotting prey. But as the line of customers shifted forward, she dismissed us with a huff, her attention redirected to a display of impulse-buy candy bars. My gaze drifted back to her, and I couldn't help but drink in the outrageous spectacle before me. There she stood, draped in a vivid purple t-shirt that boldly proclaimed, "Jesus loves me," the golden letters glaring like a beacon of misplaced piety. The shirt clung to her chest, perhaps a tad too tightly, accentuating everything but the divine message it was meant to convey. Neon lime green leggings, equally snug, clashed horrendously with her energetic ensemble, reflecting a vision of someone who had perhaps lost not just their fashion sense, but a struggle with the color wheel itself. Completing her ensemble was that bright red baseball cap emblazoned with white block letters reading, "Make America Great Again." It perched atop her head like a crown of twisted patriotism, an emblem of a conviction that danced precariously close to parody. The pièce de résistance were her sneakers, flashing with a kaleidoscope of colors, each stride sending sparks of light into the abyss of shoppers, turning the dull fluorescent lights of the grocery store into a disco inferno. The line of shoppers began to inch forward again, a slow march of holiday desperation mixed with an odd sense of morbid curiosity. Every little advancement felt momentous as the ghastly woman ahead of us, clad in her vivid getup, made our shopping experience a spectacle of its own. I watched in macabre fascination as she reached behind her, unbothered by the sacred decorum of public settings, scratching where one simply does not scratch in front of civilized company. The sight was both appalling and oddly engrossing. It was like a train wreck that I couldn't pull my eyes away from, a violation of everything we understood about social norms. As the line progressed another agonizing step, my gaze flitted down to her shopping cart, where the contents revealed a different kind of horror. An extraordinary amount of bran cereal stacked high and ungodly numbers of prune juice piled precariously on top. It appeared her diet was a preemptive strike against whatever delightful culinary indulgence awaited her during the holidays. My inner voice interjected before I could stop it. "Well, it seems she knows what a fiber-filled Christmas looks like," I muttered under my breath, losing the battle to restrain my thoughts. Finally, the woman ahead of us reached the cash register, and I nudged Leslie, signaling us to advance our buggies. The cashier, a girl barely 17 with vibrantly bright blue hair that seemed to emit its own glow under the fluorescent lights, looked up. Her face lit up with recognition as she spotted Leslie. "Hey, you're the one who did my hair," she exclaimed, waving cheerfully. Leslie offered a warm smile back, her professional pride evident as she exchanged greetings. As the cashier began scanning the high-fiber bounty, the garish woman unloaded several enormous blocks of cheddar cheese from her cart onto the counter like a king displaying his spoils of war. "Well, now that makes sense," I remarked quietly, watching the juxtaposition of her supposed health-conscious buys with the creamy decadence of the cheddar. The atmosphere shifted abruptly as the woman, the epitome of tacky, tossed her money at the cashier with the grace of a circus performer throwing pies. Coins clattered ominously across the counter, causing Leslie to gasp in disbelief. I was momentarily entranced by the sheer audacity of the display, but the sweet cashier, with tears starting to pool in her eyes, simply smiled through the discomfort, handing the woman her receipt. "Now you have a happy holiday, ma'am," she said, her voice steady yet soft. Fury erupted from the garish woman like fire from a dragon's mouth. "I most certainly will not. This ridiculous trend of saying Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas, I mean, come on. What's wrong with celebrating the one holiday that actually puts the cheer in cheerful? It's Christmas. We rejoice in bells ringing, carolers singing, and the smell of fresh-baked cookies that make your heart swell with joy. It just makes the baby Jesus cry. Get your manager now." Her voice was sharp and unyielding, the words sharp like daggers aimed not just at the cashier, but at everyone within earshot. Instinctively, my heart raced as I jerked my buggy, and Leslie's, out of the line's firing line, acutely aware of the storm brewing before us. The emotional fallout would surely become a tidal wave, crashing innocently on the shores of holiday cheer. In an instant, I caught a glimpse of the sweet cashier bursting into tears, her warm smile vanishing like a mirage in the desert. Before I had a moment to react further, I noticed Leslie rush past me, a blur of purpose and empathy. With grace and agility that could make Olympians envious, she vaulted to the other side of the counter, her arms enveloping the girl in a comforting embrace, in a skirt and a car coat, no less. I stood there, frozen between concern and curiosity, watching as Leslie opened her mouth, ready to offer her own comfort to the trembling cashier. However, before she could so much as utter a syllable, that awful woman abruptly shoved her palm toward Leslie's face, the gesture dismissive and thick with contempt. "Oh, shut up," she barked, her tone sharp enough to slice through the holiday ambiance like a rusty knife. An involuntary "oh hell" escaped my lips, a reflexive gasp at the absurdity of it all. I watched, breathless, as Leslie's face fell, her expression caught somewhere between rage and indignation, but before the confrontation could escalate, the angry woman turned her attention towards me. "I know you. You're Tiffany's stepdaughter," she said, with an insidious glee, as if unearthing a prized relic from a forgotten attic. "Can you believe this? Those people have to sanitize everything. Happy holidays? What even is that? It's like saying happy everything. Mark my words, if we don't start reclaiming our Merry Christmas cheer, good people will be picketing in front of every store, armed with the most extravagant holiday lights you've ever seen. Maybe I'll even start a coalition, Merry Christmas Matters. We'll teach those people." Her laughter bubbled up, a mocking tone filling the air, that simultaneously thrilled me and sent chills down my spine. A flash of recognition struck me like lightning as I finally placed her. This woman was none other than the deacon's wife from Calvary's Church of the Pentecost and Foot Washing, a clapboard chapel hidden deep within the low country marsh. The same church that Leslie had mentioned only earlier that day, and the one that Tiffany, my daddy's young widow of a stepmother, had dragged me to on one seemingly endless Sunday morning. The hypocritical joy of those earnest parishioners came rushing back, a memory of a place I had sworn off after hearing tales of that very deacon's wife, the same one who made regular trips to the emergency room for being bitten by water moccasins and copperheads. That bizarre affliction seemed to be a rite of passage for so many individuals in that unique congregation, their fervor for faith often leading them into the jaws of danger in the swampy embrace of the low country marshlands. I could clearly envision Aunt Barbara Lee leaning in close to me, her voice low and conspiratorial, whispering "snake handlers," before straightening up, nodding her head knowingly. I stood there in that chaotic universe of the Piggly Wiggly, staring down at the crimson glitter polish on my fingernails. The iridescent sheen cast little sparkles of light around like a halo, but it served as a poor mask for the disturbance brewing in my chest. My heart thrummed in tandem with the anxiety tightening my shoulders, and for a moment I did not immediately respond. Instead, I found comfort in those gaudy nails, my mind drifting toward happier things, candy, perhaps. Without so much as a glance, I reached over to the candy rack and grabbed a bag of M&Ms, tossing it over my shoulder and into my buggy without a thought. It was a small act of defiance, a fleeting distraction amidst the madness unfolding before me. With my arms crossed like an unyielding wall, I turned my attention back to that rude, angry woman. Starting from the cacophony of her flashing shoes, I slowly raised my gaze, every inch of her gaudy attire a testament to her personality, until our eyes locked. I could feel the air around us thickening, a palpable tension hanging between us like a dense fog. Taking a deep, exasperated breath, I donned a mask of feigned sweetness, letting the honey drip from my words. "Oh, Bobby Joe Lurleen Hilliard, bless your heart. I know this time of year can be stressful, but as one of those people, I can assure you that sweet girl was just trying to put a smile on that face of yours." There was no missing the sarcasm woven deftly into my tones, akin to the sweet poison of a fruit basket left on a porch to sit too long in the southern sun. The rude woman nearly screamed, her voice a shrill kitten caught in a storm. "That is not my name, and who do you—" I cut her off mid-sentence. Placing my hands firmly on my hips, I said bluntly, "I don't care." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst, and a rush of adrenaline coursed through my veins as I took a deliberate step toward her. She matched my stride with a retreat, a wary creature sensing the encroaching predator. Despite being inside the grocery store, an inexplicable breeze began to tease through my black hair, swirling it around my face like an ominous halo. I could see Leslie, still comforting the young cashier, shuffling her safely hide behind her back. "Uh-oh," she declared, her tone oscillating between playful and perturbed, an acknowledgement of the tempest unfurling before us. With my right arm raised, I extended my index finger in the woman's direction, a gesture as pronounced as a gavel striking in court, and as if choreographed, all the buggies in the checkout area rattled abruptly, rolling back about a foot. A gasp rippled through the onlooking customers, eyes wide with shock. From behind Leslie's protective backing, the still sobbing voice of the cashier reached my ears. "Oh!" The sound was a desperate gasp for air, more than an expression of communication, underscoring the surrealism that seemed to grip the moment. Furrowing my brows, I declared, "Let me tell you one goddamned thing." The air vibrated with layers of indignant Southern women, ancestors of the Beaumonts manifesting in my resolve, ready to rise. There are more than 5 million people in our great state of South Carolina. Not accounting for the atheists and agnostics, our neighbors could be Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, or even Jedi. And we know what the good book says about our neighbors, don't we, Annie Jo? The woman's mouth flapped open, desperate to retort, but I raised my palm, silencing her. A lot of them have holidays this time of year, and while there may not be a lot of them, politeness dictates we do not intentionally be rude. And while it may be, I glanced at Leslie for confirmation. Leslie chimed in with a semblance of cheerfulness in her voice. "If I recall, it was 55%. "That sounds right," I affirmed with appreciation. "It might be about 55% of our neighbors are assholes like you, but that does not change the fact that whether it is a birthday party or a solemn dinner party, a party is still a party, and we will not tolerate trifling little bitches like you ruining our parties." As I stood firm, the embodiment of all the indignant spirits that had borne witness to similar injustices throughout our history, in that moment I was not simply defending holiday cheer, but also standing for a community that thrived on the roots of inclusion and dignity, a veritable bastion against the brigands of contempt. The muses ruling over the piped-in holiday music must have agreed. The persistent lute begging for a hippopotamus screeched, then stopped to be replaced with the dramatic crescendo of, "Do you hear what I hear?" Putting the astonished stares of those around us, I turned slightly towards the candy rack, almost as a means to soothe the swelling tension in my chest. Selecting several more packs of M&Ms and a pack of grape bubble gum, I tossed them casually into the buggy before snapping my attention back to the hateful woman, the atmosphere thick with the residue of confrontation. There she stood, glaring at me through a veil of indignation and ignorance, foolishly attempting to deliver her next barb. "You have some nerve, Savannah Beaumont. Your cousin, Stephen, told me all about you and the dirty little secrets of your family." "Oh no, 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 no," I interrupted her sharply, drawing out each syllable with deliberate disdain. "LaDonna Whately, yes, I know your real name, but you've confused this with an amusing little scene on Designing Women. There's no chipper give and take happening here. I don't care what my cousin may have said to you. I'm actually curious whether it was before or after you told him God hates him and offered to send him to a conversion camp. No, don't answer that. It doesn't matter. Every breath that crosses his tongue carries a basket of lies. He isn't even really a Beaumont." I could feel a pulse of confusion radiating from Leslie as I heard her gasp softly from behind me. "He's not really your cousin?" she asked, her voice tinged with shock. I cut my eyes to Leslie, nodding slightly. "He is, but only by marriage and scandal," I clarified, before returning my focus to the woman, raising my hand again, index finger extended as if drawing a direct line between us. At that moment, I began to trace small circles in the air with my finger, invoking a root, and, as if on cue, the overhead lights flickered ominously, dimming and flashing erratically as the December skies outside unleashed a torrent of cold rain. The heavens roared in response, a cacophony of heavy droplets hammering against the roof of the store, drowning out all else. "Here's what is going to happen now," I declared, my voice firm as I projected over the sound of the rain. "You might be white, you might be trash, but you certainly aren't poor," I continued. "You're going to open that ugly plastic purse of yours, take out a crisp $20 bill, and hand it to that sweet girl that you made cry. Do it very humbly and sweetly. Then say, 'You are sorry for making the baby Jesus cry.' Then you'll find that manager you wanted and do the same with him." I paused, the excitement bubbling in me before turning abruptly to the crowd. "Lucas LaSalle, are you in earshot?" With a determined stride, Lucas pushed his way through the mass of shoppers, his presence like a beacon in the storm. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, and I felt a rush of gratitude for his fortitude as I called upon him. "Won't you be a dear and put your big muscles to work? Escort Mrs. Watley and her bags to her car when she's done. Don't worry, the rain is fixing to stop." Turning back to the woman, now utterly astonished and confused, I continued, "And you're going to tell Lucas you're sorry and give him $20. As a matter of fact, you're going to give $20 to every homeless person that you see, every person raising money that you see, or anyone who just looks like they've had a bad day, and you'll tell them you're sorry for making the baby Jesus cry. You'll do that until you've given $20 for every language ever spoken in this country, including Pig Latin and Klingon, or until you and the deacon are flat broke." A grin crept up on my face. You might even call it sinister as I called over, "Leslie, do you know how many languages that is?" Still patting the hand of the poor cashier, Leslie was caught off guard and shrugged. "How the hell do I know? There had to be at least 500 native languages spoken before any of us got here." I narrowed my eyes and gave the hateful woman a stern look, usually reserved for one of my twins. I almost felt sorry for her, and I did have empathy for her and most of the women like her. Women who had spent their entire lives under the heels of ungallant men, from their daddies to the football jocks to regrettable choices they married, leaving them to seek validation and self-worth by hating someone else. There's a famous quote about that, but I couldn't recall it then, and I can't recall it now. As Lucas LaSalle rolled her buggy past us, he gave me a wink and snatched the red hat of hate off her head with his forefinger and thumb, dropping it in a trash can as he rolled the buggy towards the doors. I shooed her away with my hand and said softly, "Now, go on." Her shoulders sagged. The fire she had clung to extinguished. She muttered, "My car windows were down," sounding like a child caught in a fib. "I know," I replied glibly, then added, "And stop eating all that cheese. I'm convinced that is why you're a miserable person." With reluctance, but resignation, she shuffled toward the cashier, standing, astounded with Leslie. She handed over the crisp 20, mumbling, "I'm sorry I made the baby Jesus cry," to which the cashier managed a meek "thank you," and barely began to say, "Merry Christmas," until Leslie gave her a warning look, quickly shaking her head in silent command. As the woman drifted towards the manager, the cashier turned to Leslie, eyes wide with uncertainty. "Can she really make her do all that?" Leslie chuckled, shaking her head lightly. "Oh no, nobody is that weak-minded for a route like that to stick. As soon as she's over her humiliation, she'll forget everything Savannah said." Leslie walked around the checkout counter, a knowing smile on her lips, as she looked directly at me. "I declare, Savannah Beaumont, I do believe you have out-liberaled Jane Fonda, the rainbow-festooned pride parades, and the little Wiccan people running around the back roads trying to pry secrets from the root workers, keeping tabs on all of us." "At least they won't be talking about my store-bought fruit salad," I retorted, but my thoughts wandered, distracted by the sight of Lucas LaSalle returning into the store, rain-soaked and sculpted muscles rippling beneath his wet white shirt. He looked every bit like a hero emerged from a storm, and I mouthed silently, "Sorry," before blowing him a kiss. The clink of Leslie's spoon against her coffee cup broke my attention and pulled me of my memories and back into the kitchen. As always, she seemed to know what I was thinking about. "I guess I was wrong about her not being that weak-minded," she said, still stirring her coffee. "The deacon and his wife had to file for bankruptcy last week. She sent at least one marching band to the Rose Bowl parade, bought uniforms for 3 teams of cheerleaders, and sponsored about a dozen middle schoolers in a bike-a-thon for heart disease at $20 a mile. She's adopted a tiger at a rescue in North Carolina, and somehow is sponsoring 5 different drag queens in the Miss Gay America pageant. Plus, Marlo Thomas hand-delivered a plaque from St. Jude's, and Sarah McLachlan and those poor puppies just about broke them. But it was that 4-week, all-day-long revival that the Calvary's Church of the Pentecost and Foot Washing held last June during PBS Pledge Week that finally did them in.
Oh, my dear friends, I implore you, in the name of all the restless voices simmering inside Mrs. Beaumont's neurotic mind, click like and follow. If you don't, I fear one of us will be condemned to pacing through the witching hours, ensnared by her obsession, dutifully watching a never-ending stream of videos on how to garner more followers, while another one of us is trapped singing "Over the Rainbow" in a heart-wrenching, looped lament. Let us not suffer this fate together. Spare us the madness and embrace a moment of grace.